if you're going to travel anywhere, if it's domestically or internationally, you better make sure that you are going to be correct, because somebody will find something incorrect. And that brings us to Brittney Griner, Amber. 9 years in prison for having what amounts to 0.702 grams of cannabis oil allegedly on her person, in her possession. That is the weight of a stick of gum when it comes to this. But yet, and I said it yesterday when I had a chance to fill in on Barton Hahn, and I heard you talk about it as well when you were on Canty and Carlin with Nick Friedel. With Brittney Griner, it goes beyond what the Russian courts have decided. She has now become a pawn when it comes to the term and that word respect that the Russian government is looking for from the United States government. And the United States government said, look, we just want Brittney Griner back. We don't care how we have to do it to make sure she's not going to spend 9 years in prison for 0.702 grams of cannabis oil, which is the weight of a stick of gum.
She was a pawn the second she was arrested, right? And she was arrested just days before Russia ends up invading Ukraine. We know it's a wartime that country is involved in. And essentially, Brittney Griner is being used as a political ploy in wartime. And it's becoming an effective strategy. And this is always the quagmire that our government faces when you're in these situations, right? Do you negotiate? We all want Brittney Griner to get home. What does that mean, though, for other Americans when they are traveling abroad? If you give the importance to Russia, if you kidnap one of ours, essentially, or wrongfully detain one of our own, and then we're willing to negotiate with you and give you one of our prisoners over here. And so this is always the complicating factor when you're negotiating these sorts of prison swaps. But I thought it was interesting that our government let us know that they are actively pursuing a prisoner swap with Russia. That's pretty unprecedented that we even got that information, Freddie. And I think because our government wanted the information out there, that we are trying to get Brittney Griner home, who has been wrongfully detained. They've told us since day one, essentially, that she was wrongfully detained in Russia. And so this 9-year prison sentence doesn't mean much of anything. I mean, I know TJ Quinn on our airwaves, who's our investigative reporter that has been on this Brittney Griner story since the get, he called it theater, and he called it an illegitimate system. And we all know that their justice system ain't like ours, right? And I understand that ours has some flaws, but when you're talking about a justice system in a country with a dictator, it's a very different type of thing. And so this was just a lot of political theater. She gets the sentence in 9 years. If there's any good news out of this, Freddie, which it's weird to say there's good news, but Russia has always said that it's not going to negotiate a prisoner swap or negotiate to get her home until they do go through that theater, through the rigmarole of the trial and the sentencing, which, forget about it, she was never going to get off because that's not how it works over there. So now that they kind of went through this process and we have an actual conviction over there, now presumably Russia could go back to negotiating with the U.S. And that's the hope, is that this 9-year sentence actually gets her closer to coming home.
Amber Wilson, Freddie coming in for the guys today on Keyshawn, J. Will and Max on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. And from what I read, this could drag on for years, or she could be released as early as next week. It depends. Here's the get to the crux of the whole thing, Amber. It depends on the mood of people making these decisions, and especially in the country of Russia. They could be in a good mood next week. They could be in a bad mood next week. That all depends on how they feel regarding this. And more than ever before in modern times, you have to be careful about what could people have a presentation of you. We're not talking about Brittney Griner, who just went to Russia on a whim. She's been over there before, making a lot of money playing basketball. And even she said she didn't think that she was doing anything that was going to run afoul of the law. So it wasn't as if Brittney Griner was completely oblivious to what has gone on in Russia. She didn't think she was doing anything wrong by having something for medicinal purposes when it comes to cannabis. And that still didn't matter. In a country that she's made a lot of money playing basketball, won championships, the Russian government could have cared less about that when it comes to somebody from the United States, a 6'8" woman with an alternative lifestyle that doesn't fly in Russia. They couldn't wait to use this as a political pawn to get what they want, and that is a war criminal, a man known as the Merchant of Death, and try to get that person extracted from the United States at the expense of the pawn that has now become Brittney Griner.
Yeah, essentially what we know is that they do want, as you said, that they're angling for Victor Bout, his return, who has been sentenced in America for 25 years for arms dealing. And so they're trying to get him back. He's a Russian being held over here. But then also apparently they threw in this caveat, which is what apparently originally, according to TJ Quinn, when I spoke to him yesterday on our airwaves on Canty and Carlin, he had said that the Russians also were trying to throw in there a prisoner being held in Germany who was accused of murdering somebody. And so then that was where the talks ended, because it was sort of so absurd that they would swap somebody who'd been accused of murder in this other country and being held in Germany for Brittney Griner, who's out here being accused of having this incredibly nominal amount of cannabis oil that, of course, we don't even know if she actually had it. She's always denied actually having it, even though she did plead guilty, because she did that in order to expedite this process, in order to get to a point where this sentence is levied. And so then they can go back to the negotiating table again in trying to get her home. But you're right. It all comes down to who Russia wants in return, how we're going to get Griner home. And it's a process that we don't really know. It could take anywhere. TJ Quinn told us yesterday, it could take anywhere from, a week, or it could take, 6 years. We don't know. We do know that the U.S. has been trying to get Paul Whelan home, who's another American who they consider wrongfully detained in Russia for the last 4 years.
I know.
So that has been going on for quite some time.
We keep trying to separate sports and politics, but that's not the world we live in, especially when it comes to not just domestic, but international and players going to play in other places. And you know exactly what kind of rules and regulations are there that they may run afoul of, that they may not be wary of or may not be aware of. And more than ever before, you have to be aware of those things.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.